Wolfpack of Nevada. So we'll talk to Mike Parker coming up in 2 hours. And, of course, we'll have stuff we saw on the internet. We'll have on campus in a bit. But right now, hey, because we have a special second-hour guest, we have Switcherooed again. And what a treat. What a treat for the early listening crowd. It is time for Make or Miss. Early. Let's go.
All right, firing up, make or miss here on a Thursday.
Yeah.
Justin, as it turns out, the easiest way for the Rays to get a new stadium was do nothing.
Oh, my God. It is
They might be thanking Milton.
disastrous.
Might be thanking Milton because they ain't playing baseball there anytime soon, Justin.
No.
And for the cost of replacing it, just build a whole new one, baby.
It's especially that place. Like, it's so if you haven't seen the footage yet, and
It's mind-boggling.
it is mind-boggling.
Don't do it while you're driving, but
there's something that I have
it's
I
not-
have always subscribed to, and I remember hearing it once. Mother Nature has no appreciation for human accomplishment.
no.
No appreciation for human accomplishment. You can build the most beautiful, and Tropicana Field wasn't that beautiful, but you can build these big, giant structures, and Mother Nature has no appreciation for human accomplishment. She does what she wants.
Can I take it a step further, though?
Yeah.
Taking that a step further, Justin, I think, obviously we were here, we've talked about it, and, I obviously send lots of thoughts and prayers to those affected because it's nuts down there in Florida right now. We're talking about it from the sports stadium perspective,
Yeah.
but there are obviously real people who are in tough spots, and I think this is just a chilling reminder. Do you think, and I know this is going to sound really silly, but it's just kind of funny where my brain goes. Do you think Mother Nature cared about the dinosaurs' accomplishments?
That's what I'm saying.
Right? She will.
Mother Nature has
She
no
does what she
regard
wants,
for human accomplishment. Dinosaur. What would you say the dinosaurs' accomplishment
I don't know.
was?
I'm just-
other than
I'm
being
just-
like big,
Mother Nature's
like dams and domed stadiums.
it's true. Well, it's like Malcolm said. Selected them
Yeah, they didn't build domes
for
Like, think about-
extinction. So,
Think of it. You want to talk about the accomplishments? We do baseball inside now. It's like you can't do that. It's like we do. Anyways. Here's where mine brought to though. When I saw that, Tampa Bay was 80 and 82 this year. A
Not
couple
bad.
else one way or the other. The Rays might have been in the postseason.
a couple years ago, they were really good.
They were really good a couple years ago. They were right around 500. Think about it. Where was Detroit was 76. Detroit currently in the postseason right now playing. Like Tampa Bay was, I guess, not close towards the end, but could you imagine? Where did they ultimately finish? Tampa Bay finished 6 games out of the wild card. Now that's in baseball terms, but we get in, a hurricane ripped the roof off of the stadium. It's nuts.
You look at it. It was the art material, Mother Nature, and that's why I said you want to see what 150, 180 mile an hour sustained winds look like. Look at that roof. Two, the thing that scares me the most, Justin. I know it's a different structure. This makes the damage that the Superdome took during look like nothing. At least that roof didn't come off.
I would.
You think so?
The type of roof is different.
Very.
And I'm far from a roofing expert on mine. I put up Christmas lights. I am also.
You like shingles?
But I believe the biggest problem with what happened in New Orleans and the Superdome, that's not fabric roof or whatever it is that they have in Tampa Bay. That was there were people in the Superdome seeking and I know there are cots set up at Tropicana Field, but there weren't people in there yet. Now they're gonna have to find a new place to go. But either way, both is bad. And It's nuts. So now that we get past that, what do the Rays do? Like, what do they do? Can't build a new stadium in time for next year. Ask the A's.
They'll probably.
We now have precedent set. The A's are going to be playing in Sacramento, a AAA baseball stadium for like 2 years. To a minor, I don't.
Well,
I guess can you get that roof fixed in time?
there are options. Again, Justin, we're in Florida. There's a lot of stadiums, a lot of just options. I mean, maybe, right?
It up.
So here's the thing that's scary per this ESPN story. The roof, Justin, was built to 115 to 120 mile an hour winds. They had 180 gusts at times.
That's a good fastball.
Right?
That's
And
a good fastball.
it was the world's largest cable-supported. I wonder if they can not print it, but you know what I mean? Just make another big, fat polymer and just throw it back on
Just
top.
throw it right over the top of it?
I mean, I'm no expert, but I look like, whew, what a great stadium.
It really is. That being said, from what I understand, and again, I might be talking completely out. One of the reasons why they don't have a new stadium is because you've got a fairly ownership group that doesn't want to pony up the money, and you've got a place there in Tampa and St. Pete who is like, Florida.
Once.
No.
But St. Pete is interesting, Justin, because it's so moved from. Like if we called the Portland Trailblazers, and they were in, say, Wilsonville.
Gotcha.
Right? Just kind of put that.
Like.
That's you got me there. Check and mate, sir. Congratulations. But you do. It's like, it's true.
It's further away from downtown Dallas than you would think.
This is Arlington, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
well, technically, I think it's one of those
census designated places.
unincorporated,
yeah.
like we your stadium wherever you want to build.
Jerry's smart, man. But yeah, I just so that whole point, I've been right at that stadium. I have touched it with my own hand. Rays game, otherwise I probably would have gone. But 3 years ago when I was St. Pete, Justin, is a very I don't want to say elderly, but more retired.
Yeah, it's old. It's the old.
Retiree.
It's been a topic of discussion with the Rays for a long time, is that they do not have a rabid young base because that's where retirees go,
or just rich people.
They're
just very rich.
Yeah, you got a bunch of blue hairs.
Yeah. So all that to be said,
and I say that as someone who is closer to blue hair than maybe my beautiful red hair, but
but yeah. All that being said, I'd be interested to see what they have to do, Justin. Maybe they got to bunk Peter and the Marlins, and they got to share it. I don't know, right? I mean,
pretty far place to go, but
Tampa
I don't
to
know.
Miami. That's what 2. It's
imagine Major League Baseball and Rob Manfred is sitting there going like, okay, so we have teams playing in minor league stadiums in 24.
Yeah,
what are we doing here?
Help me out here, Joe. Listen it for this. Good toss. So the Toronto Raptors were removed to Blue Jays go, because I know they couldn't play in Canada either during COVID. Where did the Blue Jays play in 2020? That I'd be curious.
That's a very good question that I do not have the answer to.
TD Ballpark in Dunedin, Florida. So
there we go.
Is
that'd be the new home of the
the
there is
precedent.
But crazy though that you might have and now for stubborn reasons, and then you would have because of Mother Nature, you might have 2 major league teams playing in minor league ballparks.
That's why it's the spring training place. So I don't know if they'll allow another team to use it. So Tampa does their spring training.
I'm sure.
But just fascinating. I love stadiums, and it's just Justin. Like, how do you think what do you think that phone call was like when you called the Rays or just the
I don't
owner
know if they're
that's-
making phone calls. I don't know if the cell towers are still up, but yeah, I could imagine.
and you're just like,
Bruce
that-
gone.
it's gone.
It's over. I saw that drone footage. That's nuts.
You're like-
It's completely gone.
Nature, scary. All right, up next on Make or Miss. Justin, we got to talk about this. The Aaron Hernandez show is bad.
We don't have to do that.
That it is good.
I haven't gotten to that point yet. I'm still in the it's so bad. It's just bad. But
I'm all in.
But some people have turned to watching it as a comedy, which
It
haven't.
basically is.
I guess haven't gotten to the murder part of the show yet, which I find fascinating. Like all leading up to this whole thing, and it's and I guess episodes, and we're only halfway through, but it's like there's a long way to go before we get to the murder. But tough watch for me. I that point where I'll just start laughing. Bill Belichick looks like a cartoon. Robert Kraft looks like a cartoon, and we had a whole discussion yesterday. We don't need to rehash, but when they get wrong, that's another thing I talked about yesterday. When they hire actors who clearly can't throw, that's when they get the jerseys wrong. Like they're wearing New England practice jerseys in the show, and it's clearly like they went to Walmart or to some local high school that is the Patriots, and they got their practice jerseys from 1997.
Yeah, I mean,
Because it's just like it's in the budget. We can't even get practice jerseys, right?
knowing now, it's like I
They look like the practice jerseys from High School Musical.
I haven't gotten to the. I full away caught up, catch up, but like I said before, the only real criticism I have with the show is kind of the physique and the fact that Aaron Hernandez doesn't look like the 6'4" tight end that he was with the guy who's I think playing him. But that being said, I disagree with Justin slightly. I love Bill Belichick. I love the actor who plays him. I think he nails it. Robert Kraft, just the the Gronk, there's already been. I don't think you've got to it yet, Justin. Already been a Giselle reference. Like I am here for it, man.
You enjoy how to spend your night. It's cringe for me. It's kind of hard to watch at some points. Now maybe I'll get to the point where you get to. I'm watching this all wrong. I should be watching this as a. But
I mean, I have been laughing a lot more. It's true. It's like I've kind of just been like, okay, let's look at it that way. But yeah, I mean, like saw kind of the clips and stuff, and there's some circling social media, and I just wonder because it was done by people who I think did do their. I'm having a hard time, Justin, finding the line of what was actually true and what is really taken out. Like, Aaron Hernandez, and I don't know, really go grab his team's pads off the field when he was naked. Like, I don't know if you've got to that.
I haven't gotten to that part
so,
yet. Wicked dudes in this show. I've noticed that, though.
There is.
A lot of, and I guess that's part of life in the NFL, but.
I don't know, just some questions. Like, where's the line? Like, is this super?
Every time I see these shows, I think when you see based upon a true story, I'm like, all right, I'm going to watch this as a fiction. Some of the stuff might be true, but I'm going to watch it as a fiction.
Yeah, I feel
because
the their acting wasn't great, obviously, but I enjoyed the story, and I'm glad it was told.
Yeah, but then like people talked about, well, they shrunk the timeline a little bit, and Chris Paul was like, I've never went to the white party. They didn't do that when I got there.
Hey, white party is kind of a bad term.
Well, it wasn't a great term then either.
I don't know if anyone will ever say it again after old Diddy Combs.
Coming up next, we are going to take a look at some college football news and notes. Also, don't forget, Trailblazers open up the season on October the 23rd against the Golden State Warriors. Tickets are currently on sale. Visit trailblazers.com. Trip to Rip City to experience the opening night tip-off of the 2020 Trailblazer basketball season. Basketball is back. Let's go Rip City opening night, the 23rd, against We go on campus to wrap up hour number 1. Next, 620, Rip City Radio. All right, coming up this weekend, obviously Oregon, Ohio State. That game kicks off 4:30 on NBC. Massive game, college game day. Josh Pate's in town, and I think the Bustin' with the Boys guys are going to be in Eugene. Eugene's going to be a madhouse. Also, the Beavs are going to be playing. They're taking on Nevada, and we mentioned it last week. Both before we had Mike Parker on the show, and then we mentioned it with Mike Parker as well. 4-1 are the Beavs. I don't know if any Beavs fans have noticed, but you're 4-1. Not the prettiest 4-1, but you know what? You take it. You take the 4-1 and favored on the road against Nevada. Chance to go 5-1, and every time if they win this, guess what? More history being made because no first-year coach in Oregon State football history has ever gone 4-1. Well, now one has. It's Trent Bray. Can he extend it to 5-1? So we'll talk to Mike Parker coming up a little bit later on in the program. But obviously, atmosphere and crowd noise and buzz and everything is being discussed with this game at Autzen Stadium. And a familiar foe weighed in. We'll hear from him in just a moment. But before we do that, let's go on campus. Here we go. I know I'm going to sound like a broken record because I brought it up yesterday. I'm talking about it right now. I'll likely talk about it tomorrow on the show. Got some pretty good guests lined up for tomorrow's show, by the way, as well. Kind of excited about that. I saw it in 2003 when Michigan and the Michigan Wolverines, who at the time were the number 5 team in the country, came to Autzen Stadium. And Michigan fans pregame were like, guys, we play in the big house. That's 100,000 people, okay? We play Ohio State in the Horseshoe. We play against Penn State. That's a fun little stadium you guys got up there, but no way it's as loud as any of these places. We'll be fine with the crowd noise. That place was electric that day, and Michigan was not fine, and the number 5 Wolverines will go down that afternoon. I remember Michigan State fans. Well, one, they came in 98, but then they came back in 2014. It's like, I mean, guys, I've seen it time and time again. These teams, they come traveling out west to face Oregon at Autzen Stadium. And unless you have been there, you will not understand what it is like. And I am excited to have Ohio State fans experience it. And hopefully it's a good enough game that the energy isn't sucked right out of the building. But one guy who knows far too much about it, as I don't know if there's ever been a bigger villain in Autzen Stadium than Rick Neuheisel when he was the head coach of the Washington Huskies. I can't think of one. And he was on CBS Sports' college football show, and they were talking about atmosphere, and they were talking about all the matchups for this game. And Rick Neuheisel had this to say about what Ohio State could expect from Autzen Stadium. Here's Coach Neuheisel.
I agree with all of you guys. You're impeccable with your information.
But
have you ever been to Autzen when those people get turned out?
No.
As Diego Pavia
Yeah, I
would
was
say,
gonna
right? This is going to be wild. This is going to be maniacal, and Eugene will come to life. And Dylan Gabriel also knows how to play on this kind of stage, having done it against your Longhorns a year ago.
How did he do
Over
against
100
the
yards rushing in that game.
taking?
I'm taking the Ducks.
Ooh.
Ducks are winning at home.
Negative waves.
Oh, Pac-12 man right there.
There you go. There's Rick Neuheisel. He's picking Oregon, and but more importantly, kind of going back to what he was saying. Brendan, you've experienced it in a Civil War or two at Autzen Stadium. I know you were there as a reporter and as a media member, but you've experienced it. Clearly, anybody that's been to an Oregon-Washington game, it's one of those things that is hard to explain. Do you know what I mean? Like, hey, 60,000 people. Yeah, it's a jet engine. The way the stadium was constructed, the way they kind of pipe in some noise too. I'm not going to lie about that. But I was trying to think. I've heard a lot of boos in my time at Autzen Stadium.
Like booze or booze?
No, well, I've had some boos.
Oh, gotcha.
I have.
Had to clarify that. Again, the English language, so fascinating.
It is incredibly fascinating. No,
There, and there.
do we need 3 of them? Anyways, I've had some booze at Autzen Stadium. I will have some booze at Autzen Stadium on Saturday, but I've heard some booze, as the Bronx cheer, if you will. There has never been a more despised person on the turf at Autzen Stadium than Rick Neuheisel. I say that with my chest. There's been some enemies. There's been some rivalries. Nobody in the history of Autzen Stadium has been hated and despised and booed mercilessly more than old Rick Neuheisel. Part of it was because, well, Washington was really good, and he really liked to tell people about it. And they beat Oregon. I want to say it was 0-2. I want to say it was 0-2. They beat Oregon, and they decided that they were going to go ahead and take a picture right there on the O. The entire team, the entire Washington Husky team, as champions of the Northwest, and took a picture on Oregon's O. That created a whole bunch of vitriol. Oregon would then play a video of Rick Neuheisel and then edit cut to somebody throwing up. Rick Neuheisel threatened to sue because he said that could hurt with recruiting because there were recruits at the game, and the Oregon video board had someone throwing up with Rick Neuheisel. Never has there been more vitriol and anger at one person at that stadium than Rick Neuheisel, and no one knows more about what the Buckeyes are walking into, at least at kickoff, than Neuheisel. And the fact that he's picking Oregon. Now, I don't know if you want to, Brendan, I don't know if you want to dive into this, but you're kind of leaning Oregon's way in this game.
I'm going down to Reno, and I'm planning on coming back with some cheddar. Your boy needs some cash. So, yeah, we're going to be building some awesome parlays this weekend. I feel confident Oregon will get it done.
Okay.
In Autzen, I'll probably take them on the money line because they are the slight underdog, if I remember correctly.
It's 3.5.
Yep. So I'm going to take Oregon on the money line, get that parlay way up. I don't know if I'm going to put a whole lot of money on it, but I'm going to dabble. Enough to make it interesting. Do that with a combined Beaver win, maybe throw in a couple NFL games, and look at that. We got ourselves a parlay.
According to ESPN Bet, the game started at 3.5. It's now down to 3.
And what's the money line for Oregon?
Money line is plus 135.
That's not bad. You double
Plus
your money.
135.
You double your money if you take Oregon. I mean, that's interesting, Justin.
On the outright win. Ooh, the outright win.
I don't know. Would you put your money where your mouth is?
I can't
Would
bet.
you?
I can't bet on Oregon. I can't.
Okay, fair
It's too much. It's too much emotion involved. I can't.
Why don't you do one bet to win, one bet to lose?
I won't hedge. I'm not going to hedge.
Hedge your bets, baby.
Now I do bet on Oregon to I have them winning the Big Ten, so I guess I do have some money on it because if they win this, they're in the
I might
driver's
have to
seat.
put some future bets down too. I'll be at the sports book this weekend, folks.
I also had Dylan Gabriel winning the Heisman. I don't think that's going to happen.
He could
Man,
win
what
this weekend. You never know.
What could you have gotten if you had found Genty at the beginning?
Probably plus 1,500.
How
2,000?
much money could you have won? All right, we may talk about that. We've got NFL game tonight. Baseball playoffs we haven't talked about as well. Plus, Doug Lesmerises from Ohio joins us in hour number 2 next, 620 Rip City Radio.
7 a.m. on a Thursday. Brendan Slaughter with you for Rip City Mornings. The Mets are headed to the NLCS after besting the Phillies 4-1 to take the series 3-1. Elsewhere, the Dodgers even the series at 2 with the Padres, while the Yankees and Tigers took leads over Kansas City and Cleveland, respectively. Coming up on the big show, we're going to catch up with Doug Lesmerises and Mike Parker. Got a whole bunch more football to talk about. Hour 2, Hour 3, Rip City Mornings coming up.
Hey, welcome back to Rip City Mornings, everybody. Hopefully you are all having a fantastic Thursday. As Brendan just told you in the update, Doug Lesmerises, Kings of the North college football show, is going to be joining us in about 20 minutes. You know, there was a time when the Pac-12 existed, and I was kind of on the forefront because I kept saying, you know what? I'm tired of the Pac-12 apologizing for being the Pac-12. And I'm kind of at that point now where I'm tired of West Coast football apologizing for being West Coast football. And the thing I like about Doug, who we're going to be talking to in about 20 minutes, he has the mindset, but that of football in the North. Because we just give a pass. The SEC comes out and says it means more, and we all just believe it. And Alabama loses to Vanderbilt, and that's, well, it's kind of embarrassing for Alabama. That's not a stain upon the SEC as a conference. Could you imagine if Ohio State lost to Purdue? I mean, or if Ohio State lost to UCLA? And the stain that would be on the Big Ten. Oh, clearly the Big Ten's not what we thought they were. I mean, look, nobody does that with the SEC. Nobody does that with the SEC because the SEC has got the greatest marketing arm in all of college football, and that is ESPN and College Game Day, and they push the narrative. Oh, this means more here. See, Alabama just lost to Vanderbilt. Vanderbilt lost to Georgia Southern. Let that sink in real quick. Vanderbilt lost to Georgia Southern. This is not like some plucky upstart Vanderbilt team. This is a bad Vanderbilt team. They lost to Georgia Southern.
Can we put some respect on Georgia Southern's name, though?
My apologies. I know they play in what used to be Turner Field. I don't know if it's still called Turner Field.
Do you know who they are coached by? The one, the only, the great Clay Helton. So I've always had a soft spot for Georgia Southern.
You like Clay Helton?
I think like is
think
a
you
strong.
You think you got a bad rap?
No, he got a deserved rap, but I just kind of like he was like kicked out of town quite literally, and all of USC's problems were his fault. And then Lincoln comes in and kind of masks it a little bit, but I don't know. I mean, I've always just kind of been like, he's a good coach and probably a better coach than Georgia Southern, so he'll have that program kind of like when we saw Hugh Freeze with Liberty, right? Where it's like, this is a guy who probably deserves to be a Power 4 coach somewhere, but he's going to go dominate at this level next. So I'm curious. He's 500 in 3 seasons. Maybe he doesn't last, but I like to see him win.
But nevertheless, Vanderbilt lost to Georgia Southern.
Yes, they did.
And that team then went and beat Alabama. And if Georgia Southern played Alabama, it would be a 45-point spread. And I think that might even be a bit generous. But the SEC doesn't take any heat, right? The SEC doesn't take any heat for the number one team in the country. By the way, I was wrong when I said Georgia Southern. I apologize to all the people at Georgia Southern. Georgia State beat Vanderbilt. Georgia State, the Panthers of Georgia State.
Well, I know nothing about their coach and that stuff. So, yeah, I know nothing about that.
So we just did 3 minutes on. That was my mistake.
Yeah, no, I apologize. I led you guys down a rabbit hole. Nothing I said about Clay Helton now matters. So.
Yeah. And Georgia State is 2-2 on the year, and one of their 2 wins is against Vanderbilt. So now Georgia State did lose to Georgia Southern. So there you go. Way to go, Clay Helton. And so the thing, again, that I liked about Doug is it's like, yeah, you guys have a propaganda arm in ESPN that just continues to push, the SEC, it just means more. It's like, if Clemson lost. Who's the worst team in the ACC? Who is
Probably Stanford.
Is Stanford the worst team in the ACC?
Crazy as that sound, maybe. Yeah, could be.
Let's take a look. North Carolina is 0-2. Where's overall rankings? There we go. Come on. This is, by the way, ESPN's college football standings thing is incredibly difficult to navigate. Let's see. Yeah, like Wake Forest. Wake Forest is 1-3.
Super happy the Beavers have added them to their future schedules
Yeah.
coming up. Good team to play.
Like, if Clemson lost to Wake Forest, or actually Florida State might be the worst team in the ACC, or if Clemson lost to Virginia or Virginia Tech, like, it'd be a stain upon the ACC. Oh, SEC. Alabama loses. Nah, we're fine. Did want to talk a little bit of baseball. The Mets move on, the Phillies go down, and I saw on the internet yesterday the hot take of is the first round bye that you get for being one of the top two teams in either the American League or the National League, is that becoming a detriment? Because we have seen some teams go down. We've seen the Dodgers were on the brink of elimination till they got the win, big 8-0 win yesterday against the Padres. So they force a game 5. The Phillies went down. The Yankees got a win over Kansas City. But it looked as though there was a point when the teams that were home field advantage and got the bye gave up a loss at home, which puts you kind of you lose your home field advantage. And so there's the hot take out there. Is it a detriment? Is it a detriment to have to sit around, rust versus rest, right? All that stuff. And anybody that knows anything about baseball, even the most elementary thing about baseball, knows two things. One is that your pitching rotation and your bullpen availability is everything in the postseason. It's everything. And two is that postseason baseball is truly a crapshoot. It is. It's a crapshoot. There is nothing that translates from regular season baseball to postseason baseball. It doesn't translate. The Dodgers had the best record in the league. They are 98-64 this year. 64 times the Dodgers lost in baseball. And then you take that. You take 98-64, best team in the National League. You put them in the postseason. Now you take 162 games and it breaks down to 5. Now, 5, sometimes 4. You look at the Phillies. The Phillies won the division. They were 95-67 this year. Yet the Phillies lost 3 of their last 5 in the regular season. Why? Because in baseball, you lose. It's 67 losses on the year. There is no translation from regular season baseball to postseason baseball. And it's hard for baseball fans. I am one. To wrap your head around. I love the Braves had the best record in baseball last year. Couldn't win in the postseason. Why? Because sometimes it's not your night. Sometimes the ball doesn't bounce your way. Playoff baseball is an absolute crapshoot. Yeah, sure. It helps to have Shohei Ohtani and Mookie Betts and a good pitching staff and everything else. And when you do get that first round bye, and you can set up your pitching staff, your rotation. You can rest your bullpen, and you don't have to come limping into the next round wondering who's going to pitch Game 3. It's like, we'll worry about Game 3 then. But the Phillies fans that were losing their mind on the internet yesterday, or before yesterday's game, the Dodgers fans that were losing their mind. And I know if you are a fan of a team, and I didn't want to hear it last year as a Braves fan, but if you are a fan of a team, you just have to understand. You go into postseason, it's a crapshoot. It is. All it takes, one middle reliever to have a bad day, and that changes the entire outcome. Think about the sample size. Just it's. I'm not the best at math, but think about the sample size. You have a middle reliever have a bad day in July, you're fine. You're fine. It's 1 of 162. You have a closer that blows a save in August. You're okay. It's 1 of 162. Huge sample size in the regular season. The more talented teams win more games. The better managed teams win more games. You get to the postseason. You have one bad at bat with a runner in scoring position. Could change the entire outcome of a series. It's a crapshoot. It always has been. And I know that we all like the movie Moneyball, and I love the movie Moneyball, but I've also read the book. And one of the parts of Moneyball, the biggest criticism was, yeah, you look at all the things he did with Moneyball. Could never win in the postseason. Billy Beane would be the first to tell you that's right. Because Moneyball was not designed to win in the postseason. It's designed to win in the regular season. The postseason is a crapshoot, and you gotta get hot. I don't want to say get lucky because it takes talent and skill, but
getting hot's key. Baseball is the most unpredictable. You're absolutely right, Justin.
And just the sample from 162 to 5.
Yeah, I mean, I remember the end of Moneyball when they're talking. They're like, "This is why the Oakland A's were flawed because they lost to the Royals and whatever."
Yeah.
And you're just like. No, because then you see the great story at the end of the movie is like, that's what the Red Sox did. They tried to hire Billy Beane. He didn't take the job, but then they used his model and won the World Series. So, I think there's a lot to that there. And, kind of the other thing too, Justin, is it's so odd, but like, Mr. October baseball, we always know October's a baseball month. It's pretty clearly like third on people's radar right now behind the NFL and college football, isn't it? Like, it's just kind of interesting when, college football's in its prime, NFL's in its prime, and then we're dealing with postseason baseball too.
Well, the NFL is...
I think they're competing a little bit.
The NFL and college football will always run the fall. They always will.
Right.
If the Yankees Yankees play the Dodgers in the World Series, it will take over.
So when did that change? Because again, baseball, America's past.
Yeah.
When did it change for you?
I think the biggest change was the strike of 94.
Interesting.
The strike of 94,
Okay.
a lot of fans got turned off of baseball. And the reason there was a strike in 1994 was because the league wanted to put in a salary cap. And the players' union won. They were too strong. The owners caved, and there is no salary cap today. And a salary cap, like you have in the NFL, ensures that, like, the Houston Texans they're good now. They were terrible 3 years ago. Can't do that without a salary cap. Can't do it. They created Moneyball because there is no salary cap, and you had to find different ways. But to me, like, from the fan perspective, it was a combination of the strike in 94. Now, a year later, Cal Ripken Jr. would break Lou Gehrig's streak, and that was a very big deal. And then you would have the summer of 98, which was Bonds and McGuire, which was huge. Then steroids came in. And steroids came in and brought in a bunch of doubt. But the other thing, and I don't have any evidence to back it up. It's anecdotal, and I'll wrap it on this. Social media and the internet came into our pockets in the mid-2000s. And you know what that created? Fantasy football for all. Yeah, there's fantasy baseball. It's way more involved than fantasy football.
Oh, it's ridiculous. And it's like, what, 6 months? 6 months?
When fantasy football became available in our pockets on our phones, the NFL became king.
Yeah,
the NFL became, and it's fantasy football and betting and all that stuff. All right. Speaking of football, pretty big game down in Eugene. We're going to talk to Doug Lesmerises, Kings of the North. He joins us next, 620 Rip City Radio. It was a couple of months ago. I was doing this show from Indianapolis, Indiana. Never thought I would ever be doing a radio show from Indianapolis, Indiana in the month of August, but I'm glad I was. I was sitting at the field at Lucas Oil Stadium in my little table and
Got your internet figured out.
got the internet figured out.
That
and
was a
everything.
morning.
It was touch and go for a while, and a table away from me was a show called Kings of the North, and Doug Lesmerises, who hosts Kings of the North, came up and said, "Hey, how you doing?" Very nice, very pleasant guy, and we sat, we had a chat. He came on the show, and I'm like, looking forward to talking to that guy, especially when Ohio State comes out west to Autzen Stadium. Ohio State, Oregon, they both did their job. They're both 5-0. They're the number 2 and 3 teams in the country. The college football world is descending upon us here in the Pacific Northwest. So what a time to bring back onto the big show from Kings of the North college football show. Doug Lesmerises back on the show. Doug, good morning. How we doing?
Great to talk to you again. And I think to correct the record a little bit, I came up to you and said, please let me be on your show, please. And you were gracious enough to let me do that.
There was no groveling. There was no begging, and especially if you knew this show at all, Doug. Anytime, any excuse I have to talk college football, I shall take. And boy, it has been a fun week. Here's what I wanted to start with, because I've ran through the research, a lot of it in my own head, as somebody who has covered and been a fan of Oregon football my entire life. Regular season game. There isn't a bigger one than this. Ever at Autzen Stadium, and really, there's a handful of regular season games for Oregon football that were not at Autzen that kind of compare, but not really. When you got maybe the number 1 spot in the country on the line, the name recognition of Ohio State. So for Oregon fans, we're geeking out here, Doug. I'm curious, for Ohio State fans, what is the feel, what is the vibe of this game, of the Buckeyes heading out west to Autzen?
Yeah, geeking out.
Yeah.
Yeah, like super fired up. Oregon coming to the Big Ten was a huge deal. Ohio State wanted more big dogs in a conference that until the last 3 years with Michigan, it had dominated for about 2 decades. So they want that. They want more big games. They want more great teams. And people were really excited about the home and home with Oregon in the non-conference.
Mm-hmm.
And the trip to Eugene got wiped out by COVID. So Ohio State fans have been looking forward, the ones who are going to be there have been looking forward to going to Oregon for like 10 years, right? Since that first series was on the books and got eliminated. So there's a lot of build-up for this of going to a cool place that's different, but also a top 3 matchup. You know, Ohio State, right, is accustomed to these, right? But it doesn't diminish it at all. And like we have a fan base that we send surveys to. I said, like, what's your excitement level, 1 to 10? And they were like over a 9, right? So like it is not, Michigan, Ohio State is Michigan, Ohio State, but people are super fired up for this.
Doug Lesmerises from Kings of the North College Football Show joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. It's interesting you brought this up, and I believe you mentioned it back in the summer, too, when we talked about the excitement of Oregon heading into the Big Ten, because Doug, we got still a little bit of an inferiority complex out here. We were, when I say we, I'm talking about Oregon as a fan base, kind of the little engine that could in the 90s. And then, the Nike money started becoming a little more prominent, and the uniforms, and then it was, all of a sudden getting into these big games, getting into these big bowl games, playing for a couple of national titles. Ohio State took us to the woodshed in one of those games, Doug. But there was always a feel of like, we want to be included in the big boys club, and never quite felt like they got there. And then when you hear things like the Big Ten bringing in Oregon and Washington and USC and UCLA, and you think like Oregon is arguably, USC is who they are, but in a football brand in the last 30 years, Oregon has been one of those. It's fascinating to me that that's kind of been the look of Oregon, where us out here have always been the, hey, we want to be in the club, whereas like it feels like in your neck of the woods, like, no, you guys are cool. You guys are, we're kind of excited about this.
I would just tell Oregon fans, chuck that inferiority complex. That is not how you are viewed out here. And I covered the Rose Bowl after the 2009 season, right, when Ohio State played Oregon in that game. And that was like still early in Chip Kelly and maybe undersized offensive line and that kind of offense that's making up for that. And that was sort of like, okay, here comes a physical Big Ten team. Let's see what happens. And I do think Ohio State fans back then, which is a long time ago, maybe had that view of Oregon. But I think since then, I mean, again, the 14 national title game, that's another great game, but I don't think Ohio State fans took Oregon for granted in that, not when you have a guy like Marcus Mariota.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at this point, with Dan Lanning and the attitude and the substance and the physicality, what he's brought to Oregon, adding it to the cool uniforms and the Nike money, and the Ohio State fans are very tuned into recruiting, and they understand that Oregon is jacking up the recruiting, right? The Texas receiver Ohio State was interested in that Oregon got, right? I mean, like they see that Oregon is acquiring talent now too. So I don't think there's anything about Oregon that anybody around Ohio State, and again, we do a whole show on Kings of the North, 28 Northern teams. There's not anything that we view Oregon as inferior to anybody about anything.
Doug Lesmerises from the Kings of the North college football show joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. All right, Doug, let's talk about the Buckeyes. I thought one of the biggest moves that they made in the offseason was bringing in Chip Kelly, obviously a guy that we are very familiar with out here. Yeah. And while college football is I don't think the rules will ever allow it. And again, it's funny. I love talking to the kids and telling them, like, you guys do not know what up-tempo football was like until you saw Oregon in 2010. Like, you just do not understand it. But Chip Kelly has always been kind of one of those, matchup wizards and trying to find the weakness. What has Chip Kelly brought to the Ohio State offense? Obviously, Ryan Day, very much an offensive coach, but bringing in Chip Kelly, I thought was an interesting move. What has he brought here that you've seen in the first couple of games?
Yeah, creativity in the run game, creativity in the run game, creativity in the run game,
mm-hmm.
right? That this is, and as people know, Chip Kelly is Ryan Day's mentor. He recruited him when Chip was the offensive coordinator at New Hampshire, and Ryan was a high school quarterback in New Hampshire. He played for Chip Kelly. When Chip got the head coaching job at Oregon, he wanted Ryan Day to come out. I think Ryan Day could have been Chip Kelly's Mark Helfrich, but he didn't want to move to Oregon at that point in time with his family, being a New England guy. So, like, Chip, the first thing is that Ryan, I think, needed to hand over play calling just because he had too much going on, but he had to find somebody he trusted to hand it over to. He tried to hand it over last year, and he couldn't let himself do it. And there's nobody he trusts more in football than Chip Kelly. So just that trust factor is huge. But then Ryan's really good in the pass game. They could at times get a little stale in the run game, and Chip has made them more of a balanced gap scheme, zone scheme team as opposed to last year when they just ran outside zone a lot. And their run game is really downhill, really effective, more physical, which Ryan Day always wanted but kind of maybe couldn't get to. And so you see, I think, the off-field stuff with easing the burden on Ryan Day, but on-field, Travion Henderson, Quinshon Judkins, the offensive line is playing well, but it's because Chip Kelly's putting them in really good situations with the run game he's been calling.
Doug, one of the things I'm going to be fascinated with in this game, and it's one of the unique things in college football. Coaches will never admit it. They will never admit it, but you could look at Oregon's schedule and you could look at Ohio State's schedule and you could say, if we just kind of do what we need to do, if we play fundamental sound football without any bells, whistles, razzle-dazzle, we're going to be able to be 5-0. Oregon got a little bit of a scare with that Ashton Genty guy because turns out he's unbelievably good. But even still in that same context, right, you've seen some wrinkles for Oregon, but not a lot. I feel kind of the same way about Ohio State and what I've seen them. And because it's one of the unique things that in college football, you can kind of look ahead a month and a half and go, we're going to save that for that game. I get the sense both of these teams, I don't know when, and it's going to be fascinating, this chess match between Will Stein and Chip Kelly and both defensive coordinators, because I get the sense there's some wrinkles from both of these teams that we haven't seen all year.
Yeah, they're so similar with what they've done offensively, and they're really so similar in many ways across the board on both sides. But I'm curious about, like, the deep shots. But, again, right, didn't Dillon Gabriel come out and throw a deep shot the first play against Michigan State? Like, I think only 10% of his throws are over 20 yards or more down the field, so it's not a thing they do a ton. But I think 2 or 3 shots here or there in this game could matter a lot. The thing that Ohio State did last week was they ran Will Howard, the quarterback, for the first time. He'd been averaging 2 called runs per game. He had 8 called runs last week. So it's like, why didn't they save that? Why did they unveil that? Well, maybe they wanted Oregon to have to think about that. Now they have the wrinkle off of that, right? I would look for a empty set, looks like a quarterback power, like the QB is going to run, and then he steps forward 2 steps and then steps back and throws. I'd look for that in this game. Like, I do think they both want to hit the short passing game and turn those into explosive plays. And that's what both sides do really well. But then, like, what else? So, yeah, I think there probably is a next step for both these offenses. And like you said, Iowa, real test. Boise State, absolutely real test. But they also have eyeballs and calendars, and they know this has been the one they've been pointing at.
Doug Lesmerises joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. He is the host of the Kings of the North college football show. Doug, let's talk some Big Ten. It's a bit of an adjustment for me, and I think a lot of fans out here, because we're just so accustomed to, once you get into October, you start taking a look at the Pac-12 standings. Well, the Pac-12 standings have 2 teams in it right now, and it's just been an interesting adjustment, kind of looking to the Big Ten, especially in Oregon's case, because, Doug, in 5 games, Oregon has played 2 teams from Idaho, Oregon State in a non-conference game, at UCLA, and then a Jonathan Smith coach team. So a lot of familiar foes for Oregon in the first 5 weeks in what is kind of this season of change. But at the beginning of the year, it looked as though Oregon, Ohio State were going to be at the top of the conference. I still believe that. Penn State was going to be close. And then after that, there was kind of a schmishmash in the middle there. In the Big Ten, is it still Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, those 3 clearly separated from the rest of the pack, or is there some teams like Indiana, Illinois is intriguing to me. The Huskies seem to get it figured out last week. What's your take on kind of the after those top 3 in the Big Ten?
Yeah, I do think those 3 have separated themselves, and I think going into the year you would have had Michigan, Iowa, USC next. And maybe those 3 aren't quite as good as people thought, right? But then I do think the middle of the Big Ten, I've been doing this is my 19th year, is maybe as good as I've seen. Mm-hmm. And that's talking about Indiana, that's talking about Rutgers, that's talking about Illinois, and like what Washington showed last week. And again, Washington, and it sounds like an excuse, but they really are 2 plays away, a couple missed field goals away from maybe being undefeated. So that, like, on one hand, I'm a little bit worried. I really want the Big Ten to get 4 playoff teams. I'm a little bit worried about everybody beating themselves up and, like, who that next candidate is as the 4th playoff team. Nebraska in there as well, for sure. But I love the games, right? I'm super excited for Iowa-Washington this week, right? I was super excited for Rutgers-Nebraska last week. Like, I think we're going to see good ball, but I also think they're going to beat each other up a little bit. And so in the South, when they beat each other up, they have a way to spin that it's good for both teams. Oh, Vanderbilt, you guys don't know how good Vanderbilt is. It's like, what are we talking about? And then up here in the North, sometimes when teams beat each other up, we have a way of turning it into a negative for both teams. So I do think Indiana's for real. They have a home game with Michigan in a couple weeks that is probably the decider of whether they're a real playoff contender. But I do think that middle, for 10 years, I covered a Big Ten where it felt like Ohio State could sleepwalk to the Big Ten title every year when Michigan was down. And that's not that fun. And it's super fun right now. I think there are like 10 to 12 really good, well-coached football teams in this league. And so that makes for fun Saturdays, but I'm not sure what it's going to mean at the end of the year.
Well, and that's the other thing I want to talk about, because inevitably we do have to get to the point of the season where we start looking at that playoff, and it's a new format. It's a 12-team playoff, but it's still a committee. And I have been asking this question. This audience is probably sick of me asking this question, Doug, but I will continue to ask it because we don't know. We have got about 100 years of college football of knowing how rankings work. You know what I mean? Like, you go undefeated. You're going to be 1, 2, or 3 in the country. You take a loss. You do the little chutes and ladders things. And we got like 100 years of that. And now we go in. We got a committee. We got 12 teams. conference championships with some automatic bids. It feels more basketball NCAA tournament than it's ever been before. And so I'm curious, like you talked about, I agree with you. You look at the middle of the Big Ten, and while none of those teams are maybe world beaters, you show up, you turn the ball over a couple times, and you play some bad football, they're going to beat you. And so I wonder how much of that is going to be factored in with the committee towards the end of the season, or do you think we're going to have still the old school, who's undefeated, who has one loss, who did they lose to, right? And then we argue about the losses as opposed to the wins, which always drove me nuts.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of everybody was upset about Florida State not getting in last year, and I was too. But on the other hand, it's like, well, they didn't just look at the records.
Yeah.
You know, they said, well, just because you're undefeated, we're going to put in this one-loss team instead because we think they're better. Their resume is better. So I'm super curious about that. But and the other thing is about this, there is like a little confusion there. But let's also remember, like, there's a heck of a lot of confusion in the SEC right now. Why does anyone think Ole Miss is good? Why does anyone think Texas A&M is good? Why does anyone think Kentucky is good? Right? So Tennessee just lost to Arkansas. Arkansas lost to Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State stinks. Why is any of this? So there's confusion everywhere. So as we search for teams in the Big Ten, they also are searching in the SEC. So we just have to constantly remind people of that. And I hope the committee keeps that in mind. And it's fun. Teams have opportunities. People are having discussions about this. It's great, but I don't have the answer, right? That, you know, I heard some national guy the other week say, I'd put in 9-3 Ole Miss ahead of 11-1 Indiana, and I wanted to jump through my TV screen. Because if you go through the schedules, Indiana's schedule is at least equal to Ole Miss, if not better. But then on the other hand, you're not beholden just to the record, which is good, but the SEC bias is bad. The Big Ten is playing good ball, and I just think Oregon fans and everybody watching this league, watch it with that mindset. Iowa and Washington are two good teams this week. One of them's going to lose. But I think that's going to be good football, and we have to keep reminding people of that because in the SEC, they remind each other of it every 15 seconds.
One last thing before we let you go. Really appreciate you hopping on with us, Doug. Doug Lesmerises, Kings of the North is the show. You need to be checking it out on YouTube. So travel has been a thing. We knew that coming into the season, and we've seen now some teams go down, and I think it might be a convenient excuse of bringing up travel. I guess two travel questions. One is how worried are we about that runway in Happy Valley? Do we get that? Are we going to get that on the mend? Are we worried about that hour-and-a-half trip to Harrisburg? And two,
that's yeah.
And I guess I was going to say,
you want to do runway talk? You want to do runway talk for like 20 minutes? Yeah. I'm actually from that part of the country. Like, I grew up going to Penn State games. The airport that they're flying out of is the airport that I flew out of as a kid. Like, you know, you build a campus in the mountains. What are you going to do? I don't know what to tell you. Like, you're going to move the entire campus of Penn State University? They could have built Penn State in Philadelphia if they wanted to. Whatever, 150 years ago, they didn't. So this is what you hath wrought. Sorry about your runway.
I was really going to divert some NIL funds maybe to try to get that runway a little bit longer. I don't know.
You're going to blow a hole in a mountain? What are you going to do? I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to flatten the Nittany Mountain? I mean, it's the name of the team is it's Mount Nittany. You got I don't know. You have a short runway.
But
Sorry.
I guess the more serious question I did have, like, it seems as though some teams have handled the travel better than others. Is that because maybe some of the matchups didn't work out and we don't have a good enough sample size because we really haven't seen – Ohio State hasn't traveled to the West Coast yet this year. We haven't seen – and Penn State's heading to USC. We haven't seen that. The better teams – I mean, Oregon hasn't traveled further than Los Angeles this year. So I think it's – do you think it's like what I believe, which is the good teams really just haven't traveled yet?
I do think it matters.
Yeah.
I am accounting for travel in how I view this season as people get used to it. Because, yes, Ohio State plays these – they usually play a major non-conference game. They didn't this year. You know, I was out. Ohio State played at Washington in 2007. I covered that. They played at USC in 2008. They got their doors blown off at USC in 2008. I remember going to the walkthrough at the Coliseum with Ohio State, and they lost 35-3 the next day. And I was like, okay. So, like, I think as people get used to this, it does matter. I am accounting for it in my pick for this game, that it's in Autzen. It's going to be nuts. And Ohio State, you know, they don't travel 2,500 miles all that often to go play a football game. So you are right. I'm not going by the statistics, the 1-7 or whatever it is. I mean, USC, I'm not sure Lincoln Riley knows how to coach anymore, that he can't figure out how to go win at Minnesota. That's on him. I would not use that as evidence. But I do think it's an issue. And then I also assume when Oregon gets into the part of the schedule, right, where it's Purdue, Wisconsin, Michigan every other week, back and forth, those 3 Midwest road trips for Oregon, I think there's probably a toe stub in there somewhere. Because, that's real, back and forth. So until they get used to it, which they aren't yet, I think it matters. And I don't know if you're going to ask me, but I'm picking Oregon to win.
Well, I was going to actually tease it. I was going to say, if you want to see Doug's pick, maybe go to Kings of the North.
I'll give you now.
And watch the show. But you just gave it as he's got Oregon as the win at Autzen Stadium. I'm fascinated about this game. I'm excited to be in the stadium for the game. Doug, hey, thank you so much for the time. Doug Lesmerises, Kings of the North, at KOTN-CFB. Find it on YouTube. Thanks so much for your time. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon, Doug.
Thanks for having me.
There you go. All right, coming up next, we wrap up hour number 2, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, a big thanks to Doug Lesmerises, who joined us last segment. A lot of fantastic stuff. It is interesting, like how you perceive yourself and how others perceive you, or how you perceive your college football program and how others receive your college football program. And I've talked to Brendan about this both on the air and off. I think there is a of certain age levels of Oregon fans like myself. There's the Ryan the Temp syndrome. Another Office reference on this show. Ryan the Temp on the show The Office, he came in, he was a temp. Even though he moved all the way up to corporate, everybody still looked at him like he was a temp. And it happens, by the way, in real life more than you think, right? You come in, you start in the mailroom, you could get up to manager. They're like, all right, you were in the mailroom. And I do think there is kind of a bit of an inferiority complex. Some call it imposter syndrome, where it's like, I remember when Oregon was flat out begging to be ranked, when Oregon was begging to get into the BCS. This is 23 years ago. But it's that Ryan the Temp syndrome. It's that this is how it was, and to kind of shake that off. And then you go outside and it's like, yeah. People in Big Ten country are like, yeah, no, let's bring Oregon in. It's a big time program. It's a big time atmosphere. And I have been saying that this game has kind of been on alert for about 5 years. Back in 2019, Doug brought up a very good point. This game was brought up 10 years ago. This is a game 10 years in the making, when they schedule, because, schedule things 8 years in advance or whatever, 4 years, 5 years. It's like, hey, it's going to be a home and home. 2020, and this was, I think, like back in 2015 when it was announced. And all of a sudden, like, sweet, we'll be able to go out to Ohio State. And Oregon fans like, yeah, and then in 2021, we'll go out to Ohio State, go to the Horseshoe. That's 2015. Boy, a whole lot of world happened between now and then. Remember life in 2015? What a time.
Yeah, dude, just about
what a
anything to
time.
go back. Good time.
There was an election and a pandemic and then another election that really kind of shook us up, didn't it?
It did.
Really kind of shook us up. Anyways, speaking of, and this is stuff we saw on the internet, but I want to stick with college football because we're having a good time. Brendan, did you see? I'm sure you did, because you cover Oregon State, and they're the big. Is Washington State? Are they going to Ole Miss? Did I see that pop up there?
If they did, I didn't see it.
But what's the game? The Beavs, they got the Wake Forest game, right?
Yep, they get the Wake Forest game. In a couple years, they play at Ole Miss.
That's the one I was thinking. So
yeah, I'm going to that one.
The Beavs at Ole Miss. What year? When is that?
2028 or 2027. Family's only known about it for like 15 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So that was the one I wanted to bring up, because, again, this weekend is kind of one of those games where you are sitting here in 2024. When was that Ole Miss game announced for the Beavs?
2010, probably 18 years ago. And no, I was slightly wrong, Justin. 2027 is Ole Miss. So just 3 more years.
I have always said I think it's one of the dumbest things we do in college football. But you know what? Maybe I should take a step back. Maybe I should take a step back from my snarkiness, because I've never understood why. Like, why do we schedule things out 8 years in advance? The NFL schedules things in April. Now, again, less teams, one scheduler, right? I get it. But why do we need to schedule things out 8 years in advance? But on the other side, fans for Ohio State have been planning this trip for almost a decade now to come out to Eugene. I know that Oregon State fans, like Brendan, he's been planning to go to Oxford, Mississippi in 3 years.
It's gonna be so much fun.
I'm
My sister's down. We're getting a contingent, Justin.
You should get your Airbnb like right now.
Probably
Like,
should.
How far out do you think they let Airbnbs
Like a year.
go?
Well, I don't know.
not
I would ask your wife, who's the planner of all planners.
she.
How far out can you book stuff?
Well, let me just tell you, there's stuff on the calendar for 2027 right now.
That's
Like,
why I said I look to you, because you've got a very good plan. Like, if it's doable, then yeah.
There is stuff on our calendar right now for 2027. It's
That's
not
awesome.
going to Ole Miss for the Oregon State game, but because I've never been to Oxford, but I would imagine it's probably a little bit like Eugene. It's like, yeah, if you want to stay in a hotel for a big football game, you better get in early.
Yeah, I mean, we
and probably have to pay a deposit.
Obviously, the reasons we mentioned too, but like Justin, 90% of the reason our family wanted to go to this game, we love The Blind Side. What school does The Blind Side talk about? Ole Miss. So when we saw this, we're like, ooh, chance to go to a place that we've never been and kind of get some cool inside jokes.
Plus, like Oxford is so awesome. At
Gotta
least
be
what I've seen, and then you've got the Grove, and
tailgating probably. Oh, great food.
Maybe some good food there. All right, coming up next, we got third hour. Mike Parker joins the show. We've got an RCM mailbag, and I got an NFL thought. We'll talk about that next. 620 Rip City Radio.
8 a.m. on a Thursday. Brendan Slaughter with you for Rip City Mornings. The Mets are headed to the NLCS after besting the Phillies 4-1 to take the series 3-1. Elsewhere, the Dodgers even the series at 2 with the Padres, while the Yankees and Tigers took 2-1 leads over Kansas City and Cleveland, respectively. Coming up on the show, we're going to catch up with Mike Parker in about 20 minutes, talk some Beavs as he gets ready to jump on his plane ahead to Reno and see how the Beavers are going to do this weekend down in the desert. You got final hour, Rip City Mornings on a Thursday.
Hey, welcome back to Rip City Mornings, everybody. Hopefully you are all having a fantastic Thursday. As Brendan just told you, we have got Mike Parker joining us in 20 minutes. Beavs off of a double overtime thriller. After the first overtime, I was texting Brendan. I was like, you need to go for 2. They need to go for 2. That's why I'm a big dumb doofus on my couch, because they didn't. They scored fairly easily. But Beavs are now 4-1 as they head on the road to face the Nevada Wolfpack. So more on that coming up in about 20 minutes. We have an RCM mailbag. I did want to
real quick, Justin.
Yes.
When you say that,
yes.
Every time it's just we already mentioned one, so you open the. It's like a lawyer. you open the door to this, so you allowed this. Every time you say woof, it's like I think of the Office episode, woof.com, like woof, woof.
Yeah, it's how we say it in Douglas County.
I love it.
It's a
man.
woof.
I love it.
There's a place. It's called Wolf Creek. That's what it's called.
That's awesome.
And I've made the joke so much that like I say it now normally.
Does anyone ever look at you when you say like if you just say
luckily
Western Oregon woofs?
The topic of wolf or wolves doesn't come up very often in my life, other than in sports. And then, but I I went to Western Oregon. We're the Woofs. And woofs. I was like,
love it.
It's a joke. Okay, I want to ask this. So the New York Jets, I don't know if you heard, they fired their head coach 2 days ago. And Aaron Rodgers went on Pat McAfee, and he says, I resent the idea that I had anything to do with this. It's like, all right, easy there, which is funny because Woody Johnson, and I don't want to get into this, but Woody Johnson was like, I didn't consult Aaron. And then Aaron Rodgers goes on Pat McAfee. He's like, well, he called me on Monday just to just to see how I was doing and wish me well. And I'm sure the idea that I'm going to fire your coach tomorrow never came up. Sure, we believe you guys. Neither here nor there. So the Jets will go through the rest of this year with an interim head coach. Here's my question. This will be a big coaching vacancy in the offseason. Is this a good job?
Yes.
Is the New York Jets a good job? Hear me out, though. Let's lay out some things. Never won a Super Bowl since the 60s, never been in a Super Bowl since the 60s, and have spent more time at the bottom of the division than anywhere near the top. I think that kind of matters. I do believe ownership, culture, all that stuff matters in the NFL, and I don't think they got it. I think they are. You get all of the bad parts of New York, which is the constant berating and the amount of attention put on you, but none of the benefit because you're not the Giants. You're not the Giants. You're the Jets. Jets, just end the season. That's what it stands for. So you get that, and on top of that, you will be coming into a situation where you get 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback, or he goes into a darkness retreat, realizes football ain't for me anymore, and you rebuild. It's 1 of 32. I get that, right? It's 1 of 32. It's an NFL job. Nobody who wants an NFL job would ever turn it down. But I hear things like, oh, they need to go get Belichick. They these big names, and it's like, Belichick ain't taking that job. He ain't taking that job.
I wholeheartedly disagree.
Okay, I shall hear you out. I think Belichick wants no part of that.
I think Belichick is like smiling and wanting this. Justin, you have to remember Belichick didn't want to leave New England. He was pushed out.
He was,
and the chance to go stick it to the Patriots and go for their rival. That sounds like something that's very Belichickian.
But he hated the Jets first.
Well, he also, I mean, you think about like you mentioned like the Giants. He had already coached there, obviously, so he's very familiar with the New York area. And
I'm with you there.
I don't think he'd miss a chance to be petty, where he can be like, oh yeah, I'll go take Aaron Rodgers. I'll take that elite defense and watch Robert Kraft. Watch.
So, okay.
Maybe that's just me and my thing. Maybe Belichick's like, I'm done coaching. He is pretty fun to see on interviews and podcasts now because he has a sense of humor, Justin.
That is true. So Belichick had 2 stints as a head coach of the New York Jets. He never coached a game.
Which is so crazy.
I know. February 97, he had been an assistant under Bill Parcells with the New York Giants and the New England Patriots. He was named Jets interim coach while the Jets and Patriots continue to negotiate compensation and release Parcells from his contract with the Patriots to allow Parcells to then coach the Jets. 6 days later, the Patriots and the Jets reached an agreement that allowed Parcells to coach the Jets, and Belichick became the team's assistant coach and defensive coordinator. So the Jets named him interim coach only to have Parcells come in. When Parcells stepped down as head coach after his 99 season, he had already arranged with team management to have Belichick succeed him. So Parcells is like, I'm quitting.
Yeah.
Belichick's going to be the coach.
If you ever watched the great 30 for 30, the two Bills, you learn a lot about how weird their relationship was. And at the end, Bill Belichick's like, I'm better than you, Bill. I'm tired of being in your shadow. And that's ultimately what caused the breakup between those two. It was very awkward. Very awkward.
Yeah, because he was named the coach for a day.
Yeah.
The day after his hiring was publicized, it turned into a surprise resignation announcement. So there's a whole thing there between Belichick and the Jets, and they don't like each other.
I'll say this.
And so, I don't know, could you let bygones be bygones to get back at Robert Kraft in New England? Maybe.
I don't believe Woody Johnson was the owner when that went down. He bought the team in 2000, Justin.
I know. You're right. I don't think he was either.
Okay. So that's interesting.
That logo and those fans. And
I hear you. I think it's but like, yeah, I mean, it would be cool. I guess the football NFL in me, I would love to see Bill Belichick there. I think it would just be petty, awesome. Maybe it doesn't work out, but he literally needs 20-some wins to be the greatest of all time if he isn't already. So I'd like to see that happen.
So I would be fascinated by it. I don't think it's going to happen because I don't know how much Aaron Rodgers can play high-level football. Aaron Rodgers he may play football for the next 4 years, but he's not going to be at a high level.
He did not age the way Brady aged, man. He aged more like Drew Brees.
Well, there's, I think, other factors there as well. Brady he had the torn ACL. Aaron Rodgers is still coming off of an Achilles tear.
It's true. That's a fair point.
And I know he sits in the pocket and he's not, but that's still something. I don't know. I just wonder, like I said, it's one of 32. It's an NFL job, and I understand that. I don't know if it's a great job, though, right now. I don't know if it's a job that Bill Belichick would want to come out of the cushy confines of the media where, the Sunday pressure isn't quite the same. Now, maybe he hates it. I don't know. Maybe have you ever been around those people that are only comfortable if it's uncomfortable? I have friends like that.
It's true.
It's like, you keep creating disasters. It's like, I know, because I'm only comfortable if it's uncomfortable. And maybe Belichick's one of those guys, and he goes into the media for a year and is just like, yeah, I made a lot of money, but I need that crazy pressure. I look at the Jets, and like, you have no history of winning there. Zero, zilch, none, nada. Your only history of winning is Super Bowl III and Broadway Joe Namath. Other than that, you've got a history of mediocrity, and I think that's being nice. On top of that, as we know, in 2024 and then into 2025, which is when they will be making this coaching hire, everything in the NFL revolves around who your quarterback is. And a year ago, it was a dynamite job for Robert Saleh because you get Aaron Rodgers and you had the defense. All you need is somebody that can make the throws that Aaron Rodgers can make, and then that's an Achilles tear. Ended it. Time is undefeated. Aaron Rodgers is hitting into his 40s. You have a whole thing with you bring in a new coach. Brendan, they're not going to retain Nathaniel Hackett. No. Old Aaron Rodgers is, his quarterback whisperer from Green Bay, which was a a while ago now. So they're not going to retain Nathaniel Hackett, which sounds like, and again, don't know how much of it's true. It sounds like that was a bit of a wrinkle that got Saleh fired, is because he wanted to take play calling duties away from Hackett.
It's true.
And Hackett and Aaron Rodgers have a unique. Well, that guy's not going to remain on the staff. So now you bring in a new staff. You bring in a new offensive coordinator. It could be very easy. You make a certain hire, and Aaron Rodgers just decides, I'm just not feeling it anymore. I think I'm gonna go hike the Himalayas or whatever he would do, and just now, okay. So now you're drafting a quarterback. You're gonna be probably mid to late first round. Do you tank away season number 1? I don't know if that's a job that a guy like Belichick, or who else is a fairly high level coach that's kind of out there, like Brian Flores, right? Isn't Brian Flores out there as a defensive coordinator?
Minnesota's, yeah.
Like, do you want to? I don't know if that job is setting you up for a lot of success.
Well, let me put it this way, Justin. Like I said, it is all about the immediacy. Because Bill Belichick cares about one thing: getting that 25, 26 wins.
That is true. And yeah,
you can win immediately with the Jets. That defense is elite. You get someone in there who's competent, can figure out how to use Rodgers, and one of the best running backs in football, great receiving. They have it all. They just have not.
How come they stink? Well, they don't stink, but how come they're not good?
You mentioned it. Rodgers has been mediocre at best this year. And you
Yeah.
look at, like, if they had, like, for instance, and this is the great irony, Justin, even if they had a guy like Sam Darnold, who they drafted and got rid of,
I know.
who is leading the Vikings to a 5-0 record, by the way. No biggie. Like a guy like him, they'd be like, okay, yeah, we can get it done. Like Kevin O'Connell's like, hey, guys, we have Justin Jefferson. All Sam Darnold has to do is get him the ball, and we're going to win games. And I just think there's some – and then you add in the other piece like, hey, old Bob Kraft, guess what? I'm back. I'm back.
I'm wondering, and somebody could probably do this fairly easily through some algorithm that I can't figure out, but I'm wondering, when you look at quarterbacks in the league that are having success right now, Geno Smith, he's on his second stint. He's having, like, the Seahawks play tonight, and they might lose to the 49ers, but Geno's having some success. Dak Prescott, he started right away, took Tony Romo's job, right? Tony Romo got hurt.
Curtin Camp, and Dak's like, hey.
Dak took over.
That's it.
And that was his rookie year. And the Cowboys.
Romo said, I don't know, Jerry, I'm going up to the booth.
But C.J. Stroud obviously started right away, success right away. Brock Purdy, no, he sat back and watched. Kirk Cousins, he sat behind RG3, right? Because they were drafted in the same draft class. Because they drafted 2 quarterbacks, which I still don't think is the dumbest idea.
Hey, I mean, we just saw somebody back in 2010 draft 2 tight ends. So.
Now, Joe Burrow started right away, but he tore his ACL in that year. Patrick Mahomes, he sat his first year. I think Lamar Jackson started right away, if I'm not mistaken.
He took over for members. They didn't know how
Did he take over for Flacco?
Towards the end of the year.
Yeah. So he didn't start. So I wonder if there is some sort of statistical breakdown of, like, should we really be starting these guys rookie year? Because I don't know. Patrick Mahomes didn't start. He's pretty good. But then there's also C.J. Stroud where, yeah, you start that guy and you realize who you got. I know who we got. Mike Parker. Mike Parker joins the show next, 620 Rip City Radio. All right, last Saturday, Oregon State was in a double overtime thriller and get out with a 39-31 victory over Colorado State to improve to 4-1. Next up, they head on the road to take on the Nevada Wolfpack, or as we say it down in Douglas County, the Wolfpack. The man that is going to be on the call, he joins us each and every Thursday. Your voice of the Beavers, friend of the program, Mike Parker, back on the big show. Good morning, Mike. How we doing?
Good morning, Justin. I'm thankful that you didn't begin, even though I'm going to draw attention to it, to the errata, the error that both young Brendan and yours truly committed to and made without, I think, proper attention to detail. And that's on me. Not so much on Brendan, because I was the one following behind that needed to corroborate, needed to confirm the best start by a first-year coach in Oregon State history. Now, remember that? We had a little fun with that last week, and I did mention it during hour number 2 to open the broadcast. However, Nick Daschel noted, as did others, that the great Lon Steiner, and he was one of the great coaches in Oregon State history, and I think Brendan and I both misread, in 1933, the year of the famed Iron Men game at Multnomah Stadium when the Beavers tied number 1 USC 0-0, and all 11 players played the entire football game, and USC was a national champion and mighty power and couldn't score against those Iron Men Beavers. That came a little later. Steiner's team got off to a 3-0 start and then tied a game 0-0. And I think Brandon and I both read that tie as a loss. It was a tie. So Steiner actually got out 4-0-1 in 1933. Trent Bray at 4-1. We're right to say he's the first-year coach ever to go 4-1 through 5 games. That's true. But Steiner did go 4-0-1. So we just needed to correct the record, and we needed to dig a little bit deeper. I say we, but it's primarily on me because Brendan said it first, and he's still, as Cat Stevens said, he's still young. That's his fault. I've never understood why Cat Stevens in Father and Son says being young is a fault. What can you do about that? But maybe that was why the song is about a difficult relationship between father and son.
Okay, so here's where I'm going to get confused, Mike. So let's do. I've never been the best at math, and Wikipedia has lied to me before. So
okay.
That being said, I'm looking now, and you know what? This is why we love having you on, because I did not expect, of all things, to talk about the 33 Beavs on the show today. But I'm glad we are. This is fantastic stuff. It looks as though the Beavs started off that season 3-0. Southern Oregon Normal, which I'm sure is now the beloved Red Raiders down there in Ashland. The Bearcats of Willamette at Belfield. I don't know where. Do we know where Belfield was?
It's where
located?
Dixon Recreation Center sits now.
Okay. So it's at the
we do. That's correct.
So then we got the Montana Grizzlies tied with Gonzaga up here at Multnomah Stadium, beat the Dons of San Francisco, and then would tie with USC. So if Trent Bray were to win on Saturday against Nevada and were to go to 5-1 better than
that's a good question.
4-0-2? This is the math equation we need to figure out.
Yeah, percentage-wise, I don't think so, because the law, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I think now, give 5-1 I like better than 4-0-2, and I'm going to give him the best start through 6 games ever because he's got 5 wins. But from a percentage standpoint, 0 may trump 1, and I can't figure out the math either. So you guys can go to work on that, or I'm sure somebody in your great audience would be able to text or call or email the correct. I don't have a calculator here in front of me. Can't quite do it. Can't even do it in my head, certainly. And also listening to that schedule, it's rather amazing to me that, people could almost be dismissive. Who were they playing in 1933? But they tied number 1 USC, so that at Gonzaga, they also tied 0-0. I just find that fascinating in the overall scheme of things.
You want to get
Gonzaga's coming back to go ahead.
You want to get even more into this, Mike? This is great stuff. I don't know. You probably have a lot of stuff to talk about Nevada on the pregame show, and probably not bringing up again this. So the first 2 wins were a part of a doubleheader that they played on September the 23rd, Southern Oregon and Willamette against a split squad. So it was a double header that day, Mike.
I think thus we give Trent Bray the edge. I mean, in the overall scheme of things, if he wins Saturday, given all of that, you're right. The schedule's fascinating, and the way who they used to play, where and when and how often. I mean, the Beavers have Nevada coming to town here, and the first meeting between the two teams was in 1903. 1903 in Corvallis, but that was quite a week for the Nevada Wolfpack. They lost 6 days earlier at Washington 2-0. Lost at Puget Sound on the Wednesday of the week before playing the Beavers on a Saturday. They lost 10-0, and then the Beavers beat them 15-0. That's a tough road trip for the Wolfpack to the Pacific Northwest.
Mike Barker joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. A fun do-si-do through the history of Oregon State football. But let's go to more recent history. Fun little story, Mike. I was on my couch on Saturday night, thoroughly enjoying what looked to be a crazy day in college football, and then watching the Beavs go into double overtime, and I am texting Brendan my thoughts on what is going on, and I got back a text. He didn't say it, but I felt it, where it was like, you need to leave me alone right now, which I found very interesting. He didn't say it, but he's basically said, you know what, I'm dying up here. When you get into these games, especially a double overtime, a thriller, does it almost give comfort that because you are working and are calling it and got to stay sharp and can't really get too caught up in it? Does it maybe have a little bit of a benefit? Or are you like Brendan and the rest of Beaver Nation kind of living and dying on every play?
Yeah, it does. It helps that you have a job to do, that's for sure. The nervousness that I've had through the years with big games and events is before pacing around. And I remember Pat Casey saying to me before the Beavers won in 2005 in the Super Regional to beat USC to go to Omaha for the first time in 53 years. Beavers won at Goss Stadium at Coleman Field. I did my pregame show with Pat before the game in his office, as we always did. And I'm just pacing around, and he says, "Sit down, Mike. Let's get the interview knocked out." He says, "You're more nervous than I am." I said, "Yeah, Coach." I had to own that, but I remember being impressed that the great Pat Casey perceived all of that, and he was just sitting there calmly waiting for his Yahoo radio guy to settle down and get the interview done. And that's often how I feel, even, with Matty Boyd pitching the other day for the Guardians. Before the game, I'm walking around the Valley Football Center and elsewhere, heaving sighs. "You okay, Mike?" "Well, I'm worried about Matthew Boyd today and his outing in the American League Divisional Series." And he pitched well, by the way, 4 2/3 scoreless. But the nervousness usually has kind of expended itself by the time you get into the game. And so, yeah, I think because there's a play-by-play job to do, I understand Brendan's attitude completely, but you don't really have time to commit yourself to that kind of attitude. I'm a little disappointed that Brendan told you to leave leave me alone, going Helen Reddy on you. There's a song called Ruby Red Dress, by the way, "Leave Me Alone." I think she sings 42 times. The lyrical inventiveness not at a high point in Helen Reddy's "Leave Me Alone, Leave Me Alone, Now Leave Me Alone, Leave Me Alone." 42 times she says it. Brendan sounds like he was channeling Helen Reddy during your text exchange, and he wanted to shut you down. I'm hoping that with the young man, there'll be growth, maybe even in Reno this weekend. I hope there isn't panic time in the game, but I know he's going to be there. Try again and see if he's a little more open to communication this Saturday.
Well, to be fair, he did not text me to leave him alone. I said I felt it through the text of like, Justin, tension is high. Also, Mike, Brendan knows about when I watch football on a Saturday night, and when I start texting, there's I'm not of sound mind, if you know what I'm saying. I was on my own couch and thought, and so so Brendan was incredibly polite. So I don't want that to get out there. He did not tell me to leave him alone. I got the sense though of the hey, it's
that he was struggling. Yeah,
it's
that he was
getting
struggling
a little tense up here.
Yeah. And I think we all had that kind of feeling to an extent, but I felt pretty good when even after, a stirring comeback by Colorado State. I mean, they looked dead to rights when the Beavers, I thought, were taking control of the game up 21-10 and pulling away, I thought. And then suddenly you're back in the fight. And so the Beavers get the ball back with 2.5 to play, needing to score. They've got to get at least a field goal to keep the game alive. And I thought they would. I really did. Now, when Everett Hayes lined up for the kick, I had a moment, a twinge of, we'll see now about Trent Bray saying, quote, I have all the faith in the world in Everett Hayes. And Everett did deliver on that faith and booted a clutch kick to give the Beavers a chance. Once that kick was made, I thought at home in overtime, however many there would be, that the Beavers offense would function well enough to get the win, and they did. But there was plenty of nervous time in Beaver Nation.
Radio, obviously, other than the outcome, one of the other big storylines of the game was Jam Griffin and the injury that he sustained. And I know that coaches anywhere in college football, Mike, they are tight-lipped and close to the vest, puts it mildly, when they talk about injuries in 2024. So I'm assuming there will be as few details, if any, in terms of the injury to Jam Griffin. But the reason why I bring it up is because as much as coaches, Mike, love to pound home hey, it's a next man up mentality, you always have to be ready to go, we're still dealing with college kids, and any team is kind of susceptible when you see a guy who you can count on go down, and it it felt like it took a moment for the Beavs to kind of get their bearings and to get their feet under them after that injury happened. But a significant one nonetheless moving forward, as it looks like Jam Griffin may be out for some amount of time.
Well, you're right about the way it kind of shook the team, because on their first possession, they were shaken by a turnover. They went into the game only one of 4 teams in the country with just one turnover through 4 games. And that was Jam Griffin in the first series of the year, fumbled the ball. And they hadn't had one since, and had been really clean. And then suddenly you get a pick, and the next play, Colorado State's in front on a 12-yard play, one-play drive after the sudden change. Now you're down 7-0. You get the ball back, and you turn it again. And on that turnover, you lose the guy who really took, I thought, just when you see it on replay, it wasn't a pretty sight. And I do not know a prognosis for Jam. I think what you say, Justin, in terms of maybe being out for a good stretch, a while, it has that kind of feel to it right now. I don't know the exact situation with him and his possible availability or what's going to happen the rest of the way. But yeah, now you've turned it over in your first 2 possessions, and you've lost a guy for a while. For the rest of that game, it was announced fairly quickly that he would be out for the rest of the game. So Anthony Hankerson, I thought, and I don't know if he's going to become Evanson Bernard or Steven Jackson in terms of the workload, but I think we've talked about how Mike Riley would ride Evanson Bernard to 42 carries. Ev had a couple of 40-yard carry games, high 30s. So did Steven Jackson. Hankerson at 26 carries in his 113 yards in the win. Trent Bray said that's kind of at the edge. That's at the upper level of the number of reps we would ask him to give the team during the game. Yes, in theory, but if he's hot, feeling good, running well, that 26 could push to that 30 mark, I think. And they've got, if the Jam's not able to go, Saladin Allah showed some things early that I liked, but his playing time, his workload has lessened since the early couple of games in the season. But I still think there's a lot of potential there. But Hankerson is suddenly going to be, and I think he's built for it. Physically, mentally, I think he's built to increase the workload. But it's no question, if Jam's out and out for a while, it's a big loss to a team that's leaned on that run game more than any other team in the country, really leading the nation in time of possession because of guys like Hankerson and Griffin being fresh to keep those chains moving on the ground with really a great tandem. So they're going to have to make an adjustment, that's for sure.
Mike Parker, the voice of the Beavs, joining us here on 620 Rip City Radio. Next up for the Beavs is the Nevada Wolfpack in Reno. Nevada, right now, 2-4 on the season. They're 0-1 in Mountain West play, and they lost to San Jose State last week, and obviously that probably got a little bit overshadowed by a couple of other losses that happened in college football last week. But wide receiver pass with 50 seconds to go gives San Jose State the win over Nevada. They go down 35-31 on a wide receiver trick play pass. So Nevada coming in, you could say, maybe coming in limping a little bit, maybe coming in a little bit fired up, but nonetheless, an interesting matchup with the Beavs in Reno.
Young Brendan and I were just visiting when I jumped on the phone about this, and I'm glad he lives his life this way, even talking about the textual exchange that you corrected. We don't want the misperception out there that he's telling you, shut up, leave me alone, and playing Helen Ready for you off Spotify. He's not doing that, and that's good to know. But he and I live our lives similarly in that we get worried about everything. I can tell that. And he said the more he gets into the weeds, and I said the same thing to him, with the Nevada Wolfpack, 2-4, Trent Bray will be 5-1. Forget Lon Steiner forever. Trent Bray is going to be 5-1. Well, I get a little nervous in not only reading about and writing numbers down, but talking to the people in Reno. We've had a couple of guests on our local show this week who cover Jeff Choate, the first-year head coach, former D coordinator at Texas, and a guy that's, he's lived at all levels of the game of football. He's really good. He's a good coach, and he says the guys, the team, the writers and people that cover them, the broadcasters say he's instilled an enthusiasm and a belief, and their losses have been close. They, too, like to run the ball. They're seventh in the country in time of possession in terms of running the ball, just under 200 yards per game. And they've got a dual-threat quarterback in Brendan Lewis, who is one of the best in the country at both throwing and running. The challenge to me looks more formidable than I thought when I sat down and said, okay, here we go, off to Reno and the Beavers. And it's a little bit like, in the original Rocky when Apollo's over laughing and yucking it up with friends, but his trainer is watching, the Italian stallion in some sort of feature workout punching meat in a locker and gets a little nervous about what Apollo's going to be facing. That's a little bit how I felt getting into the weeds in preparation for Nevada. They're 2-4, but their losses have been competitive, save for getting shut out at Minnesota, and they were blanked at Minnesota 27-0 at Minnesota. But they've been in every other game and are close. So I think Coach Choate is going to have everybody in from his Wolfpack team on, hey, we're at home and we can get a big win and start to turn this thing around. So the Beavs are going to have a fight on their hands, no doubt.
Oregon State and Nevada, they kick off 4:30 on Saturday in Reno. I know Brendan's making the trip. You're making the trip, Mike. You're going to be on the call. Have a terrific rest of your week. Safe travels to both you and Brendan on your way to the biggest little city in the world. Beautiful right. Reno, Nevada. And have a great call, Mike. We'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Thank you. Hey, and Brendan, we'll see each other before and after, and let's try to keep each other going along
Sounds
the way
good, boss.
on Saturday, no matter what's unfolding. Brendan and guys, Justin, thanks for having me on. We'll do it again soon. Appreciate
have a good one, Mike. I have a feeling, you know how like sometimes you need like a calming influence, as Mike was talking about, how you both kind of sit there and worry about everything. I don't know if you guys should see each other before the game. You both will just start freaking out about everything. And I did not want to. I did not mean to imply that, Brendan, you told me to shut up. I was just saying that was.
It was a good save by you.
I wanted to make sure that I got that across. You did not text me, leave me alone. I said that was the feel I got.
What they say about assumptions, Justin? They're dangerous. Especially over text message. Assuming
they say other things too. Is the whole you and me and how you spell it, but
that all being said, way to throw the life preserver and land that plane.
By the way, the 33 Beavers Fascinating stuff.
So I still feel
Fascinating
like
stuff.
Mike is totally right, but I still am right in the sense that he won 6 games that year. So my whole point of 7 wins is still the correct stand.
Also, two of those wins where they were a split squad doubleheader against Southern Oregon and Willamette. So
in that schedule, that year
they ain't played nobody, Paul.
Yeah,
33. They ain't played nobody.
That schedule was. I mean, Justin, what I wouldn't have given to jump in the DeLorean and see Oregon State play Fordham at the Polo Grounds in New York that year. I mean, just you think about that now, and you're like, wow, like did they have to take the train, Justin?
They had to. Well,
Like,
think about they played.
30s? No, there were planes in the 30s.
They played 3 games. I don't think planes.
Did we have planes in the 30s?
And there were planes, but I don't know if there was football teams going on.
Yeah, I don't know. They probably took the
Because
train.
I know that in 39, when Oregon played Ohio State in the national title game of basketball, the old Tall Furs had to ride a train all
Okay,
the
then
way.
that probably did. Probably rode a darn train, man. That's nuts.
Could you imagine? He's like 4 days just to get to the game.
That's
All right,
nuts.
we've got to get to the mailbag and wrap up the big show next. 620 Rip City Radio. All right. Time to wrap up the big show. Before we do that, though, I want to let you know about Tuesday. Justin, it's Thursday. Yeah, but Tuesday, it's Ticket Tuesday, and it's red hot and rolling. Trailblazer Ticket Tuesday continues all basketball season long here on Rip City Radio, so make sure each and every Tuesday you listen to Chad and Dwight between 3 and 6 on Rip City Drive, and you will have a chance to win a pair of tickets to an upcoming Blazer game this season. It is Trailblazer Ticket Tuesday. You can also get your single game tickets right now at trailblazers.com. Trailblazer Ticket Tuesday from Rip City Radio. Mailbag on Rip City Mornings right now.
All right, Justin. Firing the big mailbag today.
Yes.
Have you ever been able to actually solve a Rubik's Cube?
No. Never once.
I didn't think so.
Never once. Now,
did you attempt as a kid? I'm sure it was a big deal.
as a kid, I attempted. Now, I've seen, so there's a whole thing that I saw about, like, there's the secret to doing it is the corners, because the corners will tell you everything. A corner piece
I've heard the same.
Can't ever be anything other than a corner piece. So if you get the corners matched up, then the rest of it should match up just fine. I've never been able to do it. Now, I will say, have you ever been to like a Denny's or an IHOP or an Elmer's and the Ye Old Pancake House, and they've got the triangle with the one empty spot, and you jump the golf tees? I've won that before. I have solved that. Couldn't tell you how I did it, but I have solved that. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So you go to the Ye Old Pancake House or the Elmer's, and it's like a triangle with like bowling pins. I think it's like set up like bowling and there's one and you hop over them, and your goal is to get down to one of the golf tees. I've done that before. Rubik's Cube, never got it. What about you?
No,
Never
never
got
got
the Rubik's Cube?
Never gotten it. Never really. It was one of those things that I knew the whole corner thing. I could never do it. But yeah, nevertheless.
How's it those people do it in like four seconds behind their back?
Dude, like
That's
I think it's I know you didn't
it's impressive.
I know you haven't. I don't think you've seen the movie. But like there's a scene where Will Smith's character in Pursuit of Happiness solves it in the back of a taxi cab in like 20 seconds.
Okay, so I watched
fast.
half of that movie. It got too sad, and I quit.
Sad. It's very sad.
One of the very few movies I turned on. I'm like, this is just too sad.
You have to get through a lot of the sadness.
I need a redeeming something here, and I'm like, I can't.
See, I liked Will Smith and back then.
I liked him back
right?
then too,
Yeah.
but even then, I'm like, this is.
It was powerful, dude.
It was way
sad.
too long of sadness. Let's get to. Can we get some wins here, please?
Yeah, no, for sure. Something, Justin, that I sent to you a week ago, and we never brought back up again. So, online right now, they're auctioning off Game of Thrones official memorabilia from the show, right? So, like, you can literally go buy legit props. And this comes into the question, Justin, if you could have a prop from any movie or TV, what would it be? And I would absolutely take Jon Snow's sword. It went for $7,000. Unfortunately, your boy doesn't quite have that, which kind of sucks.
What are you going to do with a sword?
Put it on the wall. That'd be so cool.
I don't think it's that as cool as you think.
Well, each their own.
Okay. Maybe, I'm just thinking, like, at some point you're going to swipe right and it's going to hit, and you're going to like, hey, come over, and she's going to see the Jon Snow sword on the wall.
If she's the woman that Brendan wants, you go, wow, that's awesome. Can I
have
can
a
we start
matching
watching
one to cross.
Yeah, can we get the little one to compliment it? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, it's fair. But like it was some crazy stuff, Justin.
Jon Snow sword on the wall.
It was like, Arya's like hairband was going for like $1,000.
Yeah, I mean, that's too much.
And like everything from like little trinkets to shoes but they basically just said, all right, we're clearing out the warehouse. So now we'll close with this.
I've said this before because I have an answer to your question. I'm not a memorabilia guy, but I think the obvious answer is the DeLorean from Back to the Future.
It is.
I think that's the obvious answer is the DeLorean for Back to the Future. All right, that's going to do it for the big show. Thanks to Mike Parker. Thanks to Doug Lesmerises. Thanks to super producer Brendan. Hey, tomorrow it's a football fancy coffee Friday. Josh Pate on the show tomorrow. Adam Rittenberg on the show tomorrow. Ton of college football stuff as we get ready for Oregon, Ohio State. We'll talk to you then here on 620 Rip City Radio.